How has this year been for you? Have you grown in ways that you're proud of? Have you made progress towards your goals? Have you had any regrets or made any mistakes? And what have you learned from them? Have you lived the year in alignment with what you value? At the end of every year, I take some time out to reflect and recalibrate to make sure I am on track on my path to financial freedom and that I'm living in alignment with what I value along the way. It's an honest look back at my progress, the high points and the low points, and a time to set goals for the next year. If you have been around for a while, you might know that in my pursuit of financial freedom, I focus not only on wealth building, but also on self-growth, because over time I realized that my level of wealth will only grow to the extent that I do. So in this video, I'll be sharing my reflections and goals around these two areas. This year, I have been more intentional with self-growth than in previous years. It all started when I came across the book Rich Habits by Tom Corley. It reveals the daily habits of the wealthy and how they differ from those of the less affluent. Some of these habits include continuous learning, goal setting, cultivating a positive mindset, and prioritizing a healthy lifestyle. I adopted as many of them into my life as possible, and my most notable changes this year have come from building the habits of regular reading, exercising and keeping a healthy diet, and journaling. Reading has broadened my worldview, challenged my ways of thinking, and given me ideas to improve my life. These are some of the most impactful books I've read this year, that I will refer back to from time to time because the lessons are timeless. Exercising and keeping a healthy diet has increased my energy levels tremendously, allowing me to be more engaged in life. I have the capacity to do more and approach what I do with greater energy and focus. It enabled me to effectively balance multiple priorities most of the time, such as my day job, creating for this YouTube channel, learning about investing and trading, spending time with my family and friends, and taking care of myself. Journaling has kept me mindful of the kind of thoughts happening in my head and has been a useful tool in the process of shifting my mindset from limiting to empowering. Compared to before, when I let negative thinking hold me back on a lot of things I wanted or needed to do, I now try to work through the negative thinking and go do it. A recent example is getting over my fear of getting a dental checkup, which I haven't had in a few years. I used journaling to work on understanding my fear, breaking down the reasons why I was resisting it. Once I saw the fear for what it really was, I found ways to address it, and that eventually disempowered the fear, allowing me to get it done. It cost me a hefty bill of more than $340 because I've been delaying it for so long, but I couldn't be happier that I got over my fear. Self-growth sounds like it can only be a positive thing, but in my experience, there can be a dark side to it as well, if approached with the wrong mindset. I had the mindset that everything related to improvement and development meant that it had to be a good idea I just had to implement in my life. This was true for the initial few ideas that I came across, until I read this book, The Millionaire Fast Lane. It challenges conventional wisdom about wealth accumulation and argues that the slow lane approach of saving and investing over decades is inefficient. Instead, it advocates for the fast lane approach, focusing on entrepreneurship and building scalable businesses. My main wealth building approach is what the author defined as the slow lane approach. The book challenged everything I've learned and lived by on my financial freedom journey of about 7 years thus far. It was refreshing at first, and I was energized by the idea that there was a fast lane approach. However, the more I read and thought about implementing the ideas in my life, the more I realized that entrepreneurship was not exactly my thing. The mindset I had made me feel demoralized and stressed out because I failed to adopt a good idea to improve myself. My learning point from this is that it's okay to leave ideas on the table if it doesn't make sense to me at this point in time. While I fully agree with the principles and philosophies behind the fast lane approach, it's not a path that I want to pursue, at least not now. I am a slow laner at heart, one that uses the income from my day job to invest in the stock market to build wealth. I turbocharged this process through trading the markets and side hustling, investing the profits from these ventures to build wealth at a faster pace. I may not be as fast as a fast laner, but I am doing it in a way that aligns with me. I also had the mindset that personal development was a linear process, that it would only be onward and upward from here. Every day would be better than the last if I worked at it. But that's not the case. There were bad days. Days when I struggled to get through my routine. Days when certain priorities had to take center stage and I had to neglect others. Days when I made the wrong decisions despite clearly knowing that I had a better choice. And I felt guilty about those days and felt bad about myself. I've learned that self-growth is a non-linear process. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Sometimes it could be several steps back when life gets in the way. But as long as we continue to work at it, we will be better in the long run. It's not the bad days that set us back. It's the bad days that we do not bounce back from that will undo the progress we have made thus far. One of the high points in my money journey was having my portfolio surpass $300,000 in the middle of June this year. This was a milestone in my 7 years of building wealth, and I've shared the lessons learned over the years in this video here if you would like to find out more. Another high point was finally deciding and taking action to learn from experts and mentors about investing and trading, which are the main methods I use to build wealth. I used to think that I would be able to learn on my own since there is a wealth of free information on the internet instead of having to pay to learn. And that's what I did for several years. It got me somewhere, but it took time and some costly mistakes. Time that I have less of now that I'm in my 30s than I did in my 20s. After my 30th birthday, I became increasingly anxious about reaching my financial freedom goal. I could either speed up my journey by learning from experts and mentors, or continue figuring this stuff out on my own through trial and error and scattered sources of free information online. I chose the former because I wanted a tried and tested blueprint on succeeding as an investor and trader. It's a price that's worth the while as it has taken my knowledge and skills to the next level. I wish I had recognized earlier the value of learning from an expert or mentor, as this would have saved me a lot of time and pain from making costly mistakes. An extremely low point for me this year was repeating a mistake that I had made a couple of years ago. And that mistake was investing my emergency fund. Related to the growing time anxiety I felt after turning 30, I desperately wanted to get to financial freedom faster. In investing and trading, given the same performance, the amount of capital you have affects the size of your returns. A $10,000 account performing at 8% returns $800. A $100,000 account performing at 8% returns $8,000. The more money I had in my account, the faster I could grow my money with time in the market. I wanted more money in the market, so after deploying everything else I had, I dipped into my emergency fund. And afterwards, month after month, I invested whatever income I had left over after covering my living expenses. I was living from paycheck to paycheck. It was a highly risky situation because if a true emergency came up in the midst of a market crash, I would have to liquidate my assets at a potential loss to cover the emergency. The lack of a cash buffer in my bank account also started to affect my life, because I needed to wait for the next paycheck before I could say yes to other opportunities and experiences. This was a wake-up call. I made this mistake in 2022 and now again 2 years later. I am ashamed that this is a lesson I needed to learn twice. Perhaps I did not fully understand and address the underlying motivation the first time, which allowed the second time to happen. So I sat down and reflected. Prior to 2022, the year I was turning 29, I had never touched my emergency fund unless it was a true emergency. When I first set out the goal of being financially free, I wanted to achieve it by my early to mid-30s. Getting closer to 30 and realizing I was still far off started to make me anxious, and that triggered the irrational decision of dipping into my emergency fund. Even though I replenished my emergency fund afterwards, that anxiety stayed with me, which could be why I made the same mistake again. If I don't want to have to learn this lesson a third time, I need to change my thinking and address my anxiety. While it would be nice to be financially free earlier rather than later, it's not the end of the world to extend my timeline a little. I have chosen the slow lane, and that path requires time for compounding to work in my favor. I don't want to live in a state of anxiety from self-imposed pressure and unrealistic timelines in the pursuit of this goal. I don't want to invest all my cash at the expense of missing out on life experiences and everything else that is important to me. I want to enjoy the journey, with the assurance of an emergency fund to fall back on and money for living life to the fullest in the process. These are my high points and low points for this year, and lessons I will bring with me into the next year of my financial freedom journey. I will continue to build and sustain wealth-oriented and success-oriented habits and mindsets, and make progress towards my money goals. If any of this resonates with you, hit the subscribe button and join me on this journey.